World News Program coming to you live from Algiers with me, Mariam Zian. The headlines. The 7th Africa-Europe Summit on Cooperation and Partnership concluded in the Angolan capital Luanda. Algeria called for a reordering of partnership priorities between the African Union and the European Union, alongside intensive Algerian diplomatic activity on the sidelines of the summit. Coming up next, tonight the Sahrawi president reaffirmed to the UN chief his commitment to self-determination as the Polisario Front declared its readiness for serious, unconditional UN-led talks. Guterres said his envoy will soon engage with both parties. And Kiev sees new prospects for peace as Moscow backs Trump's plan and denies receiving any amended proposal. Hello and welcome back to your news. The 7th AU-EU Summit on Cooperation and Partnership concluded on Tuesday in the Angolan capital, Luanda, with the participation of leaders from several African and European countries. The two-day summit highlighted numerous shared issues, including peace, security, and governance in Africa, as well as mechanisms to enhance joint cooperation, sustainable growth, industrialization, and regional integration.
Indicação para fazerem as perguntas.
The Algerian Minister of State and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, called for a review of the Africa-Europe partnership, particularly in reordering priorities in the field of peace and security. Speaking at the summit on peace, security and governance in Africa, Attaf emphasized the need to focus on ending what he described as international disengagement that affects Africa's peace and security issues.
Faced with such a situation, Algeria calls for a reordering of priorities within the African-European partnership in the field of peace and security. The foremost priority must be to put an end to the current state of international indifference afflicting Africa's peace and security issues. The challenges facing our continent are not merely local difficulties or limited in scope. Rather, they are cross-border threats across nations and even continents, both in their nature and in their consequences.
Minister Attaf stressed the importance of restoring the role of African diplomacy in upholding the principle of African solutions to African problems.
The second priority should be devoted to restoring the standing of African diplomacy and to upholding the principle of African solutions to African problems. Our continental organization has already demonstrated its ability to fulfill its mandated role whenever it's given the necessary space to act and whenever it receives the required international support.
And the Algerian head of diplomacy considered a return to activate an effective investment as the best way to prevent crises, stressing the necessity of ending Africa's marginalization in all areas of international decision-making.
The third priority should focus on genuine and effective investment in development as the best means for preventing crises and addressing the root causes and development dimensions. In this regard, we look forward to the fulfillment of the investment pledges Europe has made to Africa under the Global Gateway Initiative. As for the fourth and final priority, this is a structural one par excellence. It concerns the imperative of ending Africa's marginalization in all arenas of international decision-making, whether political, security-related, or economic. This marginalization remains in itself one of the most prominent structural factors undermining Africa's progress toward realizing the aspirations and goals set out in the Continental Agenda 2063.
في الأجندة القارية 2063.
Attaf warned that the Sahel-Sahara region could become a global hub for terrorism and an international base for the scourge, which has spread corruption and crime across African countries and peoples. Speaking at the EU-AU Summit on Peace, Security and Governance, he sounded the alarm over the worsening terrorist threat in Africa after its decline in other parts of the world.
تلتئم قمتنا اليوم في سياق دولي بالغ التعقيد والاضطراب والتأزم.
Our summit convenes today in an international context marked by extreme complexity, turmoil, and tension, circumstances from whose consequences and fallout our continent has not been spared. It is a trajectory that truly calls for sounding the alarm first over the return of unconstitutional changes of government to the forefront in Africa, and sounding the alarm over the worsening scourge of terrorism in Africa after its decline in other parts of the world. Today, the Sahara region has become the global epicenter, the international focal point of this scourge, which has wrought destruction and inflicted grave harm on African states and peoples amid a striking international silence.
وسط صمت دولي لافت.
Minister Attaf also warned of the consequences of foreign military interventions in Africa, which have become a structural factor in the continent's security landscape, aggravating crises and prolonging their duration.
دق ناقوس الخطر ثالثا.
Sounding the alarm third over the spread of foreign military interventions in Africa, an occurrence that has now become a structural element of the continent's security landscape. It is a factor that complicates crises, prolongs their duration, and eliminates opportunities for their peaceful resolution. And sounding the alarm fourth and finally over the retreat of the continent's diplomatic role and the fading of international attention toward Africa's political and security priorities, which no longer receive the necessary importance on the agenda of multilateral international action.
على أجندة العمل الدولي متعدد الأطراف.
The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development expressed its readiness to support Algeria's economic diversification, particularly by developing the private sector and enhancing competitiveness in areas such as agriculture and renewable energy. During bilateral talks on the sidelines of the 7th EU-AU summit in Luanda, Attaf and EBRD President Odile Rounou-Basso reviewed current cooperation and explored future opportunities with Algeria, recognized as one of the bank's contributors. Attaf also met with João Gomes Cravino, the European Union envoy to the Sahel-Sahara region, to discuss ways to enhance cooperation and coordination in support of efforts to establish security and stability in the region. The meeting held Tuesday morning as part of the summit provided an opportunity to exchange views and analyses on developments in the Sahel, covering political, security, and economic aspects, according to the Algerian Foreign Ministry. And on the sidelines of the AU-EU summit in Luanda, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf held separate meetings with his counterparts from Benin, Côte d'Ivoire, Portugal, and Tunisia. He reviewed bilateral relations with each minister, noting recent progress, such as the exchange of diplomatic representation with Benin, preparations for the next Algerian, Ivorian, and Algerian-Tunisian Joint Commission sessions, and the positive momentum in ties with Portugal. The discussions also focused on regional developments, particularly the situation in the Sahel-Sahara region, and with Tunisia, the situation in Libya, stressing the need for coordinated efforts to address shared challenges and strengthen Africa-Europe partnership. And Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi affirmed his commitment to working with Algerian President Abdelnajid Tebboune to strengthen bilateral relations and expand cooperation. During his meeting with Algerian Prime Minister Sifi Ghraib in Cairo, Sisi praised the strong ties between the two countries and the respect Algeria enjoys in Egypt. He also emphasized the need for continued coordination on regional issues, describing Algeria and Egypt as key pillars of stability in the Arab world and North Africa, and expressed Egypt's readiness to further develop economic and partnership projects. The Algerian Investment Promotion Agency and Egypt's General Authority for Investment held their first joint technical committee meeting in Cairo to boost investment cooperation. Omar Rakash, head of the Algerian Investment Promotion Agency, described the talks as a significant step in boosting economic ties, highlighting 21 Egyptian projects in Algeria and several requests for expansion. Egyptian official Hussam Haiba called on Algerian businesses to invest more in Egypt and pledged for support, particularly with the country's expanding digital services. And now to Western Sahara. The president of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, Ibrahim Ghali, affirmed that exercising the right to self-determination is an exclusive right of the Sahrawi people and cannot be replaced by anyone. This came during a meeting between President Ghali and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on the sidelines of the 7th AU-EU summit. According to the Sahrawi news agency, Ghali renewed the Sahrawi side's readiness alongside the efforts of the UN Secretary General and the United Nations to enable the Sahrawi people to exercise their established rights to self-determination. He explained that attempts by some parties to alter the nature of a UN-registered decolonization issue through the latest Security Council resolution will neither resolve the matter nor serve peace, security, and stability in North Africa. President Ibrahim Ghali also renewed the Polisario Front's readiness to enter serious and genuine negotiations without preconditions under UN auspices. The Sahrawi news agency reported that Ghali, during his meeting with the UN Secretary General, emphasized that negotiations must create conditions enabling the Sahrawi people to freely make sovereign decisions about their future, in accordance with UN resolutions and the principles of international legitimacy. A document issued by the UN Security Council detailed Resolution 2797 from the October session concerning Western Sahara. The resolution reaffirmed the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination and called on the parties to start discussions without preconditions, rejecting the Moroccan authorities' attempts to manipulate the text to legitimize occupation. The UN Security Council has issued Resolution 2797 concerning Western Sahara, reaffirming the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination. The resolution calls for unconditional talks between the conflicting parties, undercutting Morocco's attempts to manipulate the decision to legitimize its occupation. Marwa Belawar has a report.
The UN Security Council has called on both parties in the Western Sahara conflict, the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, represented by its sole legitimate representative, the Polisario Front, and the Moroccan occupier, to engage in unconditional talks aimed at reaching a final political solution. The resolution clearly affirms the necessity of mutual agreement and the Sahrawi people's inalienable right to self-determination, dismissing Morocco's so-called autonomy plan as a colonial imposition. It underscores that the final decision lies with the Sahrawi people on their legitimate representative. The resolution also extends the mandate of MINURSO, the UN mission tasked with organizing a referendum, for another year, reaffirming support for the UN Secretary General's envoy Staffan de Mistura. This comes despite ongoing attempts by Morocco to limit or obstruct the mission's work. Meanwhile, diplomatic activity continues globally to highlight the justice of the Sahrawi cause. At the recent African-European Union summit in Luanda, Sahrawi President Ibrahim Ghali renewed his commitment to cooperating with UN efforts to secure his people's right to self-determination. President Ghali reminded the international community, especially Africa, of the urgent responsibility to end the last colonial situation on the continent. He stressed that the Sahrawi people, like all African and world peoples, have a legitimate and non-negotiable right to independence and freedom.
And President Ghali emphasized that the Sahrawi presence at the 7th EU-AU summit represents a gain for the Sahrawi people and their just cause. In statements to Al-24 News, Ghali explained that the summit provided an opportunity for the Sahrawi delegation to reaffirm the need to complete the decolonization process in Africa by enabling the Sahrawi people to exercise their right to self-determination and independence.
We
are participating in the 7th summit, bringing together the African Union and the European Union. The Sahrawi state is present, just like the other African Union countries, and we consider this a gain for the Sahrawi people and for the Sahrawi cause. We also had the honor yesterday of delivering a speech at the summit, in which we highlighted the main aspirations of African peoples regarding the African-European partnership between the two unions, as well as the major problems the African continent faces as a result of the colonial era that all African nations suffered from, and which the Sahrawi people continue to suffer from, considering that the Sahrawi cause is a decolonization issue, the last colony in Africa, and that the process of decolonization has not yet been completed.
The Sahrawi president renewed his call for the European Union to help complete decolonization by allowing the Sahrawi people to exercise their inalienable right to freedom and independence.
We urge them, specifically the European Union and our African brothers, to support the UN and African efforts to complete the decolonization process and to ensure that the Sahrawi people can exercise their inalienable and non-negotiable rights for freedom, independence and self-determination, just like the rest of the world's nations, African, European and others, that have attained their freedom and independence.
Now, the latest in occupied Palestine. Several Palestinians were killed and others injured in Israeli airstrikes across Gaza over the past 24 hours. The Palestinian Ministry of Health reported 17 deaths, including 3 new victims and 16 injuries. Since 7 October 2023, the attacks have claimed 62,775 lives and injured 107,965. The Islamic resistance movement Hamas stated that the aftermath of the Israeli occupation following its aggression and genocidal war on Gaza has caused injuries among children, highlighting the growing risks for all Palestinians in the Gaza Strip amid ongoing destruction and violence. Hamas spokesperson Hazem Qasem called on all relevant international parties to act urgently to remove hazardous remnants in Gaza, which he described as ticking-time bombs that could explode at any moment. The Algerian Council of the Nation President Azzouz Nasri reaffirmed Algeria's defense of the Palestinian people's right and its support for national unity and independent state with Al-Quds as its capital. During his reception at the Council of the Nation on Tuesday, Palestinian Minister of Education and Al-Fatah Central Committee member Sabri Saidam expressed deep gratitude, noting that the Palestinian people regard Algeria as a sincere ally in facing current challenges. And Lebanese Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri said on Tuesday that Israeli occupation has again targeted southern Beirut and its suburbs following the recent attack on Haret Hreik. Berri added in press remarks that this clearly demonstrates the lack of real guarantees to protect the capital and its suburbs amid Israel's unrestrained attacks in Lebanon. He warned that the nature of the recent attacks indicates the potential for increased Israeli escalation in the future or the near future without any serious intervention from the Ceasefire Coordination and Monitoring Committee. Still in the same matter, the United Nations called for rapid and impartial investigations into Israeli strikes on Lebanon, including last week's attack on the Ain al-Halwa Palestinian refugee camp. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights spokesperson Thamin Al-Khaitan, speaking from Geneva on Tuesday, stated that Israeli attacks on Lebanon have killed at least 127 civilians since the implementation of the ceasefire agreement on 27 November 2024 up to 24 November 2025.
Almost a year since the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel was agreed, we continue to witness increasing attacks by the Israeli military, resulting in the killing of civilians and destruction of civilian objects in Lebanon, coupled with alarming threats of a wider intensified offensive. The Israeli military's attacks have resulted in the killing of at least 127 civilians in Lebanon since the ceasefire agreement came into effect on the 27th of November 2024 and up until the 24th of November this year.
Ukraine accused Russia on Tuesday of targeting its energy infrastructure in the capital, Kiev, following a series of Russian strikes. The Ukrainian Ministry of Energy reported on Telegram that Russia had launched what it described as a massive attack on energy facilities and that maintenance work would begin as soon as the security situation allows. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Kiev sees many prospects for peace and ending the war with Russia after recent high-level talks in Geneva. Following a phone call with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Zelensky wrote on his X account on Tuesday, "After the meetings in Geneva, we see many avenues that could make the path to peace real. These are tangible results and much work remains ahead."
Thanks so much, especially.
And for their part, the Russian presidency described on Tuesday U.S. President Donald Trump's plan as the only fundamental option for a settlement in Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters that Moscow sees the U.S. proposal as a good basis for negotiations with Kiev, expressing Russia's readiness to return to the negotiating table.
At the moment, the only essential option is the American project, Trump's project. We believe that this could be a very good basis for negotiations, and our president has also spoken about this matter. We still stand by this opinion.
And in contrast, Peskov denied that Russia had received any amended American plan, stressing that it is impossible to discuss Ukraine's security system without European participation.
We have not received any information so far. Of course, we are closely monitoring the media reports that have been coming in abundance, including ones from Geneva, over the past few days, but officially we have not received anything yet.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused unnamed parties of undermining Trump's efforts to settle the conflict in Ukraine by rewriting the content of the U.S. president's plan according to their own vision. During a press conference with his Belarusian counterpart in Moscow on Tuesday, Lavrov accused European Union leaders of failing on all fronts since 2014 in response to a question about a possible European role in ongoing negotiations regarding Trump's plan.
Those who represent diplomacy and politics in Europe do exactly the opposite. The aim of those leaks? Constant speculations. Spreading rumors is only one. In this case, the aim is to undermine Donald Trump's incentive in the part which reflects understanding reached in Anchorage. They do not even try to conceal this.
Moving on now to other news, Algeria emphasized the necessity for the international community, notably the United Nations, to assume its responsibilities in supporting the justice sector in Libya. Addressing participants in the UN Security Council's special session devoted to the situation in Libya, a member of the Algerian delegation to the UN, Majdeddin Samir Boussahel, underlined that the ICC mandate in Libya should not be limited to prosecuting local elements involved in various crimes, but must also extend to include external parties involved in destabilizing the country.
تشدد الجزائر.
Algeria emphasizes the necessity for the international community, foremost of which the United Nations, to fulfill its responsibilities in supporting the justice sector in Libya through intensifying training programs, capacity building, and knowledge transfer, enabling this sector to perform its duties effectively. The mandate of the ICC in Libya should not be limited to prosecuting local elements involved in various crimes, but must also extend to include external parties proven to be involved in destabilizing the country, sowing discord and inciting against the Libyan people and state.
The head or the Algerian artist Beya Bouzar, professionally known as Biouna, passed away on Tuesday at Bni Messous Hospital in Algiers at the age of 73. Biouna was considered one of Algeria's most important artists, known for her roles in cinema and television both at home and abroad. She left a lasting mark in the field of comedy, delighting generations of audiences and becoming one of the country's prominent actors through a distinguished career in film and television. Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune extended his condolences to her family and the artistic community, praising her as one of the notable figures of the arts who contributed her talent and creativity to numerous television and film works over many years, earning wide recognition for her sincerity and spontaneity in acting and successful cinematic projects. Her talent and humor will be remembered fondly. May she rest in peace. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we wrap up tonight's program. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.